Aotearoa. That means welcome from the land of the long white cloud, which is how the native Maoris refer to the island nation of New Zealand. And that's our destination for this month's online travelogue. I'm Reese Stein, along with my wife Marianne. We took a tour of New Zealand on all the country from the north to the south just this past January and February, and we're going to give you the highlights starting from the north and going all the way to the south. It's two main islands of over 600 islands in the country. It was founded by the Maoris 700 years ago, with the last landmass on Earth to be occupied by humans. The first European to see the islands of New Zealand was Abel Tasman in 1642, but he didn't land there. James Cook was the first to reach New Zealand in 1769. So we're going to start up at the north of the North Island on the banks of the Bay of Islands, a beautiful area on the north coast, at Whanganui, which is the traditional meeting house of the Maori people, and we met some Maoris up there at the Whanganui. The meeting house is known for its huge wood carvings. The Maori were great artisans and great craftsmen, and had decorated their buildings with these beautiful wood carvings. On this land in front of the Whanganui is where the Treaty of Waitangi was signed in 1840 between the British and the Maori, giving the Maori complete citizenship with Great Britain and all the rights thereto. The treaty was signed in this building, the house of British resident James Busby, which was restored in 1833. On the land, on the property, is this gorgeous replica of one of the ocean-going canoes, which is how the Maoris first came to New Zealand. They traveled across the ocean from as far away as Tahiti and the Solomon Islands to settle here 700 years ago on these canoes. We opted for the Russell Ferry for our tour of the Bay of Islands. Now, the bay is a 100 square mile long wide bay. It features dozens and dozens of islands, 140 islands, some of them just little spits of land. We crossed to the other side to this area of Russell, New Zealand, looking down at the bay from the hilltop and the beautiful islands and the town of Russell. Russell was the first place the Maoris settled and was the initial place for the Europeans to settle because it was on this wonderful secluded harbor and was great for trade. Today it's a tourist destination with lots of stores, shops, and hotels for tourism, and it's beautiful harbor which has served man for hundreds of years. The church is the Christ Church. It's the oldest church in New Zealand, dating from 1835, and it has a beautiful historic cemetery as well. From the Bay of Islands, we sail back. This is Linda Cameron. She traveled with us. She and her husband John were on our trip, and we head back, and we take the ferry back to the town of Auckland, which was our base on the North Island. And Auckland is the largest city in New Zealand. We went out the next day and went to the island of Matangi, which is a 1 square mile long nature preserve, and it's a protected island. Only 150 people a day are allowed on this island, and you have to have a guide. Our guide there in the print shirt led us through this gorgeous forest that has been restored and replenished with native vegetation and only native species. All of the alien species which have been brought in over the centuries, such as mice and rats and possums, all those predators have been eradicated from this island, and that leaves room for the native birds on the island, such as the tuatui, which was a common robin endemic to these islands, found only here. The native Nako palm is the southernmost palm tree in the world, a beautiful palm tree. And this is a weta, which is a giant grasshopper about the size of your fist. It's the heaviest insect in the world. This is the endemic stitchbird, which was nearly killed off by mankind and was found only on some of the more remote, smaller islands and was brought here, and they're doing well on these nature preserves. This is the tui, which is endemic bird, common to New Zealand. New Zealand features, Tiri Tiri features New Zealand's oldest and best preserved lighthouse, dating from 1864. And you got to be careful of the strong winds around this lighthouse, but it's a beautiful area on top. And from the lighthouse, trails lead out through this restored forest in Tiri Tiri Matangi down to a wonderful little beach. And from here, we take the ferry back to Auckland. On the next day, we go to Waiheke Island, which is a tourist island with beautiful white sand beaches and a pristine harbor. Great place just to relax and lounge around and get some sun, the beautiful beaches, enjoy the oyster catchers along the shore, and visit some of the wineries. There are 26 wineries on Waiheke Island producing wine. Now back to Auckland, which is the largest city in New Zealand with 1.6 million people. About half the population is white. There are 37,000 Maori still living in New Zealand. This is the only city in the world built on an active basaltic volcanic field. There are over 50 volcanoes in and around this town. The town's skyline is dominated by the 1,000-foot high Sky Tower, the tallest freestanding structure in the southern hemisphere. And you can see it from just about anywhere in town. Here's the national television headquarters from right underneath the tower, and at night from our hotel balcony. The harbor is a beautiful harbor. It's been restored for recreation. Most of the commercial harbor has been moved a ways away from downtown. We're going to take you now to the Auckland Domain, a 185-acre park, a beautiful park. And this tree, the kauri tree, which is the largest tree by volume on Earth, it's been around since the Jurassic period. They grow to 150 feet high and 15 feet in diameter. It was a great tree, but it wasn't my favorite. This is my favorite. This is the Moortown fig, which is endemic to Australia and New Zealand. Gorgeous tree on this 185-acre park, the center of which features New Zealand's War Memorial and its winter garden with a collection of beautiful flowers that bloom all year round, and a little owl up in the rafters greeted us on our trip. We head south now out of Auckland to the Motunatangari Sanctuary, which is the largest ecological restoration project in New Zealand. It's a 13 square mile project. A 29-mile pest exclusion fence borders those 13 square miles. It's a long fence. And inside, New Zealand is today like it was before man got there. Everything here has been restored. Much of it has been replanted. All the foreign species, alien species have been removed. All the predators have been removed, and they can't get in because of that fence. Very dense, very beautiful area with a lot of natural native species, including the kaka, which is an endangered parrot, which again was found on some of the remote islands and was reintroduced into these preserves. The karuru was a pigeon. It's the only native pigeon in New Zealand. Their numbers have declined significantly since European colonization, and they're starting to make a comeback. A picture of the karuru, the native pigeon. The silver fern is the symbol of New Zealand. They grow to 30 feet tall. They're very dense with 13-foot long fronds, and we saw them all over the country. Here's the gate, the secure gate that you go in and out of to get in and out of the Motunatangari Reserve. Orakai Karoko on the banks of the Waikato River is the largest and most active geyser thermal basin in New Zealand. New Zealand well known for its geysers. There are up to 35 active natural geysers and beautiful jade green pools, emerald terraces, yellowish water, and very, very much like Yellowstone. One of the big differences is there's more vegetation around the banks of these hot springs than there is at Yellowstone. Beautiful blue-green pools. This is the Emerald Pool. We see people on the foot trail down below. Now we were lucky, just as I got my camera set up, one of the geysers decided to erupt. Now there is no Old Faithful there, no geysers are on schedule, so we were very lucky to see this geyser erupt. The river nearby was dammed for hydroelectric power back in 1961, and it flooded much of this area, flooding some 70 geysers and 200 hot springs. Some of the geysers that were flooded are larger than the geysers in Yellowstone. Orakai Karoko also has mud pots, and it has eels swimming in the shallows of the river, making friends with the local duck. The river, the Waikato River, is the longest in New Zealand at 264 miles. It goes through this gorge, which is only 45 feet wide, at a rate of 58,000 gallons per second. And it flows over Huka Falls into Lake Tapu. Lake Tapu is the largest in New Zealand. It's half again as large as Utah Lake, very popular resort lake. And the endemic black swans frequent this lake as well. Moving on to Rainbow Springs, this is a kiwi hatchery. The kiwi bird is also a symbol of New Zealand. They raise and release 120 kiwi a year. Kiwi are endangered. And we weren't allowed to take pictures of the live kiwi, but they had some stuffed kiwi on display for us. This is a picture from a live one. They were afraid the cameras would disrupt the growth and the cycle of these animals. Our guide Aaron, who was our guide for the entire 2-week trip, leads us off to the Redwood Grove. This is a 15-acre grove of redwood trees planted in 1901. And yes, they were brought from California as an experiment to see if redwood trees would suffice as timber accessory for the country. You can see they grow very fast in New Zealand. This tree is only about 120 years old at most. Also the silver fern in the grove, and here was the Utah contingent on our tour. My wife Mary Ann, John and Linda Cameron, Patty Shelley, and myself around one of the big trees. Heading south now, we're at the southern tip of the North Island at the town of Wellington, which is the capital of New Zealand with a population of about 400,000. The Parliament is located here in this very unusual building. The Beehive is the home of the office of the Prime Minister and all the other ministers in the New Zealand government. It's part of a 3-building complex. The Beehive on the left, the main Parliament building is in the center. The main Parliament building built in 1922, and on the right this house was converted to a library. It dates back to 1899. Victoria Hill is one of the prominent mountains in the town of Wellington, and everybody goes up there to have great views looking down on the harbor of Wellington. The harbor, the commercial portion of the harbor has been moved out of here, and it's been restored mainly for recreation and enjoyment of visitors and locals alike. Some of the warehouses have been converted to restaurants, stores, shops. They've left some of the cranes there as decorations, kind of cool. Here at the harbor are the Maori people, and they welcomed us into their building with the traditional head bump welcome, and they taught us how to paddle one of these big ocean-going kayaks, or canoes, the waka. And we got a lesson in kayak or canoe paddling, and then they put us in the boat and sent us out into the harbor, where we went through the rituals with the chants and the canoe paddle projects, and then we began paddling out of the harbor out into the ocean sea, chanting all the time as we went out and paddled around. This was a really fun experience. Here we are out on the ocean. Downtown, very modern downtown business district. In one of the city parks, the statue representing rugby, which is the national sport of New Zealand. They're very, very big on rugby. A lot of neat statues around, sculptures around Wellington. I particularly like this one, the Braille sculpture. And this disturbing sculpture sits atop the city library. Don't know what it's all about, but it's kind of cool. This is Te Papa, which is the National Museum and Art Gallery of New Zealand. And we toured this museum, and we stopped at a traveling exhibit from the Battle of Gallipoli, which is where the New Zealanders and the Australians fought during World War I. The Anzac Corps, ordered by the British to take the Gallipoli Peninsula from the Turks, and they were soundly defeated, and thousands were killed. The exhibit features huge, bigger-than-life sculptures of soldiers in action, beautiful sculptures, and tells the dramatic story of the lives and deaths of the Anzac troops, and it was very tragic scene. We take the gondola up to the top of the mountain where the botanical garden of Wellington is. Beautiful flowers growing year-round. This tree is the Monterey pine, again also reintroduced or introduced from California in the early 1900s, and this became the timber tree of New Zealand. Over 90% of the forest plantations in New Zealand are of this tree, the Monterey pine. Now we're going to skip across. We're going to leave the North Island, skip across the Cook Strait on this ferry, headed for the South Island and Abel Tasman National Park, where a local guide picks us up and takes us on a 4 1/3 mile hike along part of the 37-mile long walking track of Abel Tasman National Park. Beautiful forest right along the coast, great vegetation, swinging bridge 150 feet above the gorge, with views looking out over Tasman Bay and the Tasman Sea. Along the way, you could stop and cool off in a little pond here. Again, the silver fern, the beautiful symbol of New Zealand. Another bridge. A California quail, which was imported from California as a game species in New Zealand. It's protected here in Abel Tasman National Park. We come out of the park at Torrent Bay, and Torrent Bay is a great place for kayaking or swimming or all kinds of water sports. Beautiful bay, one of the many bays that are linked together by the Abel Tasman Trek along the coast of the northern coast of the South Island of New Zealand. We head south now to another nature preserve. This one is the preserve for birds, and mainly the takahe. The takahe is an interesting bird. It was discovered in as late as 1850, but it disappeared in 1898 and was thought to be extinct for 50 years. And then in 1948, another population was found high in the mountains, and they're brought here, and they're trying to restore them and bring them back. There are only fewer than 400 of the takahe birds alive, one of the most endangered species in the world. This was a story our guide told us that I don't think is true, but it's a great story. It's a stunted forest in the middle of the taller trees, and he says these are Siberian pines that are actually brought down by the bar-tailed godwit bird, which migrates 7,000 miles, one of the longest migration routes in the world, coming down from Alaska and the Arctic. And it would bring the seeds down, and they would nest in this area and drop their seeds, and the seeds turned into these trees, which are Siberian pines. It's a great story, but I can find no confirmation anywhere on the internet that there are Siberian pine forests on New Zealand, but it's a good story. Queenstown, on the shore of Lake Wikapitu, is the adventure capital of New Zealand. 220 high adventure activities are available here. It's the skiing capital of New Zealand. We got there in time for a summer market and a beautiful beach. Remember, this is in January, but it's summer down there in January. The beach right off the main street of Queenstown, and across from the beach is their botanical garden, beautiful garden with a lot of native vegetation in it, some baby ducks, a beautiful stone bridge, and really a neat place to take a walk and unwind. Lake Wakatipu is the longest lake in New Zealand, one of the most beautiful, and it's hard up against this spectacular mountain range called the Remarkables. And they're remarkable in more than one way, but they are very steep, very rugged, and very beautiful. We're getting in a boat, and we're going to go ride on Lake Wakatipu, and we're going to come to the Mount Nicholas sheep stand. This is a large sheep station of 100,000 acres with 29,000 Mariano sheep and 2,300 Hereford cows. So it's a big ranch. We were given a tour. We learned how to separate the sheep wool, and then we were given a demonstration of how the dogs bring the sheep in, and that's always fun. If you've been up to Midway and seen the sheepdog competition up there, you know how this works. We got very up close and personal with the sheep and the horses at the sheep farm at Mount St. Nicholas on Lake Wipatipu. Here's Patty with her newfound New Zealand friend. And Linda Cameron got a great picture of this full curl ram. Later they fed us lunch, put us on the boat, and sent us back to Queenstown, where we come to this bridge. And this bridge is where the commercial sport of bungee jumping was invented. A fellow named A.J. Hackett started bungee jumping here in 1988, the first commercial bungee jump in the world, and it's been very successful and very safe. Over 1 million jumps, and they've never had a fatality off of this bridge. We opted to go up Bob's Peak on the gondola in town to another bungee platform, and this one, a couple of people from our tour, including 75-year-old Sarah Shields, takes the leap, and she said it was a beautiful ride, very smooth landing, not a jolt at the end, and she was thrilled. And because she was 75 years young, they waived the $140 fee and let her go for free. Beth Alderman, also from our group, taking the plunge above the city of Queenstown from the bungee jump. A lot of water sports, a lot of water things to do on the water. This is the old steamship TSS Ernslaw, was built in 1912. It's the only remaining commercial coal-fired steamship in the southern hemisphere. Now, if you want something a little faster, you can charter a jet boat or get a jet boat ride and zip around on the lake. Or you can ride in one of these strange critters. This is a submersible jet ski that pops back up. Looks like a lot of fun. This was of course, kite sailing is big, paddle boarding, and kayaking is big. Just 12 miles outside of Queenstown is the town of Arrowton, and in Arrowton, in 1874, there were over 3,000 Chinese miners that were forced to live in these small huts on the bank of a small creek, but they did have access to the best ice cream store in New Zealand, Lady Jane's, where John and Linda are imbibing in some ice cream. We head to the city of Teanau, and from there we're going to travel south on the road to Milford Sound, which is down this beautiful canyon. We had stops along the way, A lot of things to take pictures of, but one of our favorite things to take pictures of was this guy, a Kia. He's a large parrot, very intelligent and very curious, both vital to its survival, and it strutted up and down our bus, picking at the insulation on the air conditioner. Got one in flight here. It's kind of cool. Red underneath its wings on the bottom there. The only way you see that red is if you can catch one in flight. We get to Milford Sound, or Piotahi, as the Maoris called it. It's on the southeast coast of the South Island, and it's not a sound, it's really a 10-mile-long fjord surrounded by sheer rock faces that rise 1,300 feet above the water on both sides. It's within Fiordland National Park and a World Heritage Site. A 2008 survey dubbed it the world's top travel destination. Now, the scar you see on the mountain there is actually what they call a tree avalanche, where the trees grow and get so heavy they just topple over, and as they fall down those steep slides, they create this scar all the way down the side of the mountain. Milford Sound, known for its sea lions, which are very cooperative, very photogenic. Along the way, Sterling Falls, 500 feet high. Rudyard Kipling called the Milford Sound the 8th wonder of the world, so it's pretty impressive. Sterling Falls, we got right underneath it. This is the south end of our journey as Milford Sound dumps into the Tasman Sea and the Pacific Ocean. So we'll say goodbye from the land of the long white cloud, New Zealand, and we'll hope to see you again next time as we travel the world in on our trips around the world. Hopefully we'll be traveling again soon. Stay safe.